Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sharing your lunchtime with us. Also, thank you for when you sign up. There is a column that asks you to indicate an area of interest or even pose a question. And we do review those ahead of time. And we did get a few questions this time, and we have incorporated them into the presentation. So we will be addressing those as we hit those topics, but don't forget, if you do have a question that's, relevant on topic, feel free to pose it in the chat. Let us begin our discussion today before there's a workers' comp claim, before there's ever an incident at all. Let's talk about how to create a safer workplace so no one gets injured or becomes ill due to employment. Well, here's one thing that is proven in industry. We call it the Labor Management Safety Committee. Frequently, it comprises an equal number of workers and managers, and the chair of the committee rotates back and forth, and you could meet with an agenda on a regular schedule so that everyone understands the value here and takes it seriously. But this is the place where the workers and the management can review the workplace and address situations before they create an incident. That particular process that seems to be perilous or might be causing some injuries. Do you have the process documented? And is it documented to be performed in the safest manner possible? Well, this is where you could address that and maybe help create that documentation. You can review your equipment and make sure your equipment is in safe working order, and hopefully no one's taken off a safeguard on that equipment. And you could also make sure that the staff is properly and safely trained in the best operation of that equipment. This is where you could pull the manufacturer's specs to check something, or even discover that you might not have those specs anymore. Essentially, what we're saying is it's a very good idea for everyone in the workplace to be thinking together about how to safely perform the tasks of the workplace. And when people get together and talk about things before there's a problem, well, you could be saving someone an injury or an illness, or you could even be saving a life. Now let's turn our attention to workers' compensation. It is a no-fault insurance system. That means that there is an insurance payer somewhere in this equation. That means that a claim is going to be filed if there is an incident. Employers have to provide, they must provide this insurance coverage for the protection of the workers in the event of an injury or an illness. Frankly, it also protects the employer to carry this mandatory insurance because in that instance, it removes liability. The employees, the workers, do not contribute to the cost of this insurance. This workers' compensation is an employee's right. It cannot be negotiated away. It cannot be signed away. It is a safeguard in the law in New York State since the year 1914. We get a lot of questions about immigration status. So let me just say right now, right off the top, immigration status is not a factor in workers' compensation, not a factor. It just doesn't appear in this system. A workers' comp claim also, by the way, is not a public charge. It is not. We sometimes get that question. And there is an executive order out there, number 170, that says New York State does not permit federal immigration officers on its premises. Sometimes people wonder about that as well in the context of immigration. And I can tell you from personal experience, the board does enforce that. And finally, there's the question of language assistance. Well, the board will provide language assistance services to injured workers for free. If a worker is having a hearing, for example, or if a worker calls into the board and would prefer to speak some language other than English, we can accommodate that. We do have interpreters, and we can also translate written documents as well, and so that is for free. This is our agency, Adams and mine, the Workers' Compensation Board. We are the regulator. We are the administrator. We oversee the workers' comp system. We do not pay the claims of injured workers, except in one instance. And I will get to that in 2 or 3 slides. But our agency has about 1,100 employees statewide. We have more than 24 offices and hearing points. We receive the reports of injury that insurance carriers must file by law. We also receive reports of payments. Again, that has to be filed by law by the insurance companies. And we receive copies of all the documents that are related to a workers' comp claim, and we keep them in something we call the claim folder. If you are an injured worker, you can sign up for e-case. That's what we call it, e-case. And that allows you, the injured worker, to see all the documents in your claim file, which can be enormously helpful to you. So if you're an injured worker, I would recommend that you go to our website, wcb.ny.gov, and right at the top, there'll be a prompt if you want to sign up for e-case. I suggest you do that. The other thing that we do is we hold hearings, among other things, obviously, but we hold hearings when it's appropriate to move a claim forward. Those are law judges employed by the New York State Workers' Comp Board who are holding those hearings and making those decisions. This is me, the advocate for injured workers. I am actually the manager of an office of people. We're a group of advocates. I'm the one who has the title, though. Technically, my title is actually ombudsman, so I have ombudsman-type responsibilities. That means the law charges me with the responsibility of reporting system issues to the head of the agency, for example. So that's how I become aware of things and try to help create a better system for us. The people in my office and I, we help workers with the more difficult and complex workers' comp claims. We're also involved very much at the outset with any fatality claims. There is a workers' comp benefit that we will talk about for the survivors of a workplace fatality. And I am the board's point person on World Trade Center claims. We had the 20th anniversary on Saturday, so this is a good place for me to remind everyone that anyone who responded, who did rescue, recovery, and cleanup at the World Trade Center or the associated sites, you have about 362 days left, just shy of a year, to file the WTC-12 form, which preserves your right to file a comp claim if you should ever need it. The deadline for that, by the way, is what I'm saying. The deadline is September 11 of 2022. And that's the legal deadline, but I can tell you that's a Sunday, so we will take them the following Monday, September 12th. But we have a year left. So if you were there, please come to our website, please download the WTC-12, and please file that to preserve your rights should you ever need to file a claim. All right, new topic. Who pays your workers' compensation claim? Well, I mentioned that the board does not. We only will be involved if there's no insurance in place, which is a rare occasion. But if there's no insurance in place, the board will end up advancing the payments, and then we bill the employer personally. So that's why it's a very serious matter. If you're an employer, you need to be carrying workers' comp insurance if you need to be carrying workers' comp insurance. The employers have to arrange for this insurance one of two ways. They can buy a policy. There are about 260 insurance carriers licensed to write comp in this state. So you could just buy a policy. The other way to do it is self-insurance. Now, there are two varieties of self-insurer. One is a public employer, a city, a county, a town. They're allowed to self-insure because they're government entities, and you know that they're not going out of business or bankrupt. Okay, so they can self-insure. The other variety is a private corporation that chooses to self-insure. Now, that is not going to be the bodega on the corner. That is not going to be a pizza place. In New York State, there are some pretty serious requirements that have to be met to self-insure. The board provides some very healthy oversight here. Security deposits have to be provided. So what that means is in New York State, there are about 125 very, very large corporations who choose to self-insure because they can. They can handle these requirements, and they've decided it makes better economic sense for them to self-insure probably. Now, here's the other thing you need to know. Self-insurers almost always, just by practice, they almost always hire an administrator to handle the claims. The technical term for that entity is a third-party administrator. The acronym, because we love acronyms in this system, well, I don't know if we love them really, but we definitely do use them. I don't use them, is TPA. So I mention this because if you are an injured worker, you are probably not going to be dealing with your employer if you have a claim. You're probably not going to be dealing with your supervisor or even your personnel or HR department. You're going to be dealing with either an insurance company, or if the third-party administrator has been hired, you'll probably be dealing with that administrator with respect to your claim. Who needs this insurance coverage? Well, to be a little bit more precise than I was earlier, because I knew this slide was coming, businesses with employees are required to have this coverage. So if there are employees, you're going to need coverage. Now, an employee is anyone who's working more than part-time. So one part-time employee, I'm sorry, you need coverage. Most not-for-profits also need coverage. The exclusion for not-for-profits is very, very limited as to who does not need to be covered under workers' comp, and it tends to focus on either clergy or teachers in a not-for-profit. They might not have to have the coverage, but otherwise, yeah, if you have employees, you're going to need coverage. Now, to drill down even further, who is an employee? Well, this is where if there's a claim, the board is going to make the call or the decision. One of our law judges will make this decision. Anyone who's providing services to an employer or to a business, for-profit or not-for-profit, that person could be considered an employee. It tends to come down to what we like to call direction and control. That's most of the decision here. As in, does the organization exercise direction and control over the activities of this worker? Now, we hear the phrase independent contractor an awful lot, Here's what you need to know about independent contractors, ladies and gentlemen. There are about 5 government agencies I can think of that care about independent contractors: the Workers' Comp Board, the New York State Department of Labor, the Federal Department of Labor, the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, and then finally, the IRS. All those government agencies care about independent contractors, and they all regulate, administer, and operate from within their own law. The workers' comp law is separate and distinct from tax law, for example. So what that means is it is possible for someone who's receiving a 1099 to be considered an employee for workers' comp purposes. Okay, so it comes down to direction and control. If you're an employer and you have questions, well, you maybe should think about talking to an insurance broker or an insurance company about checking out a policy. If you're a worker and you get hurt on the job, I don't care what anyone tells you about your independent contractor status, you should be filing a claim with the board.
Joe, if I may, we get questions about this sometimes. What about internet businesses and their workers, such as app developers, things of that nature?
I'm glad you asked me that. That's another potential employer. So number one, workers, if you work for some internet business or you're a driver for a rideshare organization, if you get hurt, file the claim. Let the board sort it out. We just don't want to see anyone who is injured on the job make the decision for themselves because they heard from their cousin Billy, who read it online, that they're not an employee. Just file the claim. Let us sort it out. And I can tell you that there are a number of, internet businesses, we'll call them, who are carrying workers' comp insurance policies. So what do you do if there is an injury? Just as we were saying, well, number one, get the medical treatment necessary for that injury promptly. Take care of your health, please. After you've done that, now we can start looking at the process. So if you're a worker, you should tell your employer in writing, as soon as possible, that you had an incident. That's called giving the employer notice. That's a key thing. And I'm saying to do it in writing, and let me give you a piece of advice at this point. Do it in an email, do it in a document, do it in some way that's easily traceable. Technically, you could send a text message to somebody, but think about how hard it is to find and reproduce a text message. So make it easier on yourself. If you ever need to demonstrate this, boy, an email has a whole audit trail right on it. That's an easy way to meet that imperative if necessary. The next thing you do is you file the employee claim, the Form C3. Come to the Workers' Comp Board site, and if you can fill it out online, please fill it out online because it's online. So there are no questions about being able to read it due to handwriting. It gets in here quicker. We get this nice clean copy. You can fill this in by hand and mail it in. That's fine. And then the other thing you're going to do is, just generally speaking, you're going to continue receiving the necessary treatment. Let me give you a tip, injured workers. If you are out on workers' comp, you're 100% disabled, and you're receiving your benefits, excellent. I hope you're healing well. You need to go to the doctor every 90 days. You need to go back to your treating doctor every 90 days and have that doctor assess you to make sure that you are healing, and if you're still 100% disabled, well, the doctor's going to indicate that, and that would not create an interruption in your benefit payments. Because if you go more than 90 days and there's no medical saying that you really are still disabled, your benefits can be interrupted. All right, Adam has a little quiz for us at this point.
Yes, thank you, Joe. All right, so I'm gonna, you see this scenario on your screen here. I'm gonna read through, and I want you guys in the chat box to just put in your answer, what you feel should happen here with our friend Kadir. Kadir is not an American citizen. He is in the United States working on a work visa. He works his standard 40 hours a week on site at a software company. He's in the sign desk using a company's equipment, tasks that the company assigns to him. He works 8 hours per day. Start and end times vary depending on the day and what work he has to do. And he's paid on a 1099, so the software firm does consider him to be an independent contractor. One day, Kadir is inattentive and he drops a computer server and it fractures his left leg. The employer calls an ambulance and takes Kadir to the hospital. And so based on all this information, the hospital is going to ask Kadir what happened and was he at work when it happened. Kadir is going to say yes. Should he file a workers' comp claim? That is our question to you. Again, just put your answers right in the chat box, what you think. Should Kadir file a workers' comp claim for this situation here? And then we'll answer the question shortly. Just if you want to just type your answers right into the chat box. We're getting some answers there. We got a yes. We got another yes. All right, Joe, we're getting all yeses to Kadir filing a workers' compensation claim. Is that correct?
It is correct, and it makes me feel like we're doing some good work here, Adam. Yes, congratulations, class. He should file the claim. You didn't buy into any of the red herrings in our question. Well done. Yes, he should file a claim. You'll notice most of the details are, just drawn from real life. And if I hadn't had that discussion 5 minutes ago about independent contractors, well, some people might have gone a different way, but we set up the question to make it apparent that the software company seems to be exercising a whole lot of direction and control over Kadir, but he has the 1099. But the 1099, as we say in the system, by itself, a 1099 is not determinative. That means just because it's a 1099 doesn't mean it's an automatic independent contractor. And then finally, I haven't used the phrase no fault, I don't think, but comp, of course, is a no fault system, which means, yeah, Kadir was inattentive and he dropped the server on his own leg, but we don't consider the issue of fault in this. Let's talk about medical benefits. We're going to move now into the portion where we explain what the benefits of workers' comp are. On the one hand, you have medical benefits, and on the other hand, you have lost wages and indemnity benefits. Medical benefits first. They are provided to a worker for medically necessary treatment for the injury or illness that's established in the claim. Okay, so if a worker has broken an arm, let's say, left arm, worker broke left arm, or Kadir broke his left leg. Okay, that was Kadir's only injury. Well, he can have medical treatment for that left leg injury for the rest of his life. Now, if he breaks his right leg playing softball, that's not a comp claim. But we're talking about the left leg. So it's limited to the injuries that are established. That's the term we use, established. This is a lifetime benefit unless you settle the claim and permanently close it. If a worker and an insurer are going to do that, they will know about that. That's a very formal process that involves a contract, I guess you would call it, and a payment of some sort. But if there's no formal Section 32 waiver agreement, medical care is a lifetime benefit. So if you are listening to me and you work for an insurer, be it a third-party administrator or one of those 260 insurance companies, please do not tell workers that their old claims are closed when they're not. Now, I'm only saying this because I get these phone calls from workers who tell me that their adjusters have said, my claim is closed because it happened in 1992. it's not closed unless there's a Section 32 or a lump sum payment. You might have it recorded on your books as closed, but the benefit is still open. The benefit is for all the medical expenses. Tests, physicians, PAs, and nurse practitioners can now be authorized in this system directly. The hospital care, the medications, everything that's on screen. Also, transportation costs to and from medical care appointments are reimbursable. If you are an injured worker and you have never done this, you have never put in for reimbursement, why don't you come on over to our website and download Form C-257, C-257. That's the form you use where you indicate where you started, where you went, and then where you ended, like home to Dr. Adams and then back home. Well, there's mileage reimbursement available for that. It varies by year, and you can use something like Google Maps or MapQuest to calculate the miles. That's fine. If you drove, if you took public transportation or something else, you would submit the receipt. And injured workers, there is no time limit on this Form C-257. So if your claim is 5 years old and you never did this, you can go back 5 years. I would suggest you use multiple sheets, but you can go back 5 years. And the adjusters will pay these, and the money's there, and it's your right as an injured worker because you are out this money to get treatment for an injury due to your work. Here's a little best practice. Well, we just went over the mileage and reimbursement. I was mentioning earlier that you should see your doctor every 90 days in what we call ongoing disability. You should also understand your degree of disability. This is a number from 0% to 100%. This is an indicator of your health, probably, but it's also a basis for your benefits, your payments. If you are 0% disabled, you're healthy. You don't have any disability at all. You're healed if you've come back from an injury. If you're 100% disabled, there's a provider who's saying you can't work because of this disability. As people heal, well, they might go from 100% disability to, say, 50% disability. And the benefit, the lost wage benefit that we'll talk about in a moment, well, that would reduce down to 50%. Also, when you go to see the doctor, injured workers, this is my plug for the healthcare profession. Let's make things easier for healthcare providers. Injured workers, please arrive at your appointments with your WCB case number. It might start with a G. It's going to be 8 digits for sure. Please arrive with that and give it to the provider staff. Also, why don't you arrive with the insurer's case number? The technical term for this is a carrier case number. The insurance companies will issue their own claim number to everything, just like the board issues its own claim number. So there will be 2. If you give the provider the board number, the carrier case number, and then the name of the insurance company, then they know who to bill. Then they know who to file all of your reports with, and that's just going to make your life so much easier because you won't have delays, and the providers will actually get paid for their services, which is not only fair, but, well, it's going to make a stronger workers' comp system as well. Here's another best practice, the independent medical exam. Oh my gosh, Adam, I forgot to answer a question. I'm going to answer a question right now. We did get a question ahead of time, speaking of healthcare providers. So before we talk about independent medical exams, One of our healthcare providers who's on this webinar right now wanted to know about something called the HP1 process. Okay, the HP1 process, that has to do with providers contesting payment of their bills for services. There is a process for that. If you are a provider and you are in disagreement with the reimbursement you got from the insurance company, there is a process, there is a form, you do have to file it, you do send it to us here at the board, and we will adjudicate it. The best thing I can tell you is come to the website, look under healthcare providers, and the form and the process will be explained there, because it's the kind of thing that we could do an hour webinar on just by itself. And also, as long as you're there, why don't you take a look at the board notifications and see if you can sign up for some notifications that pertain to healthcare providers. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But I do have a second question. The second question I got from a healthcare provider ahead of time had to do with the HIMP process. The HIMP process, HIMP is an acronym that means Health Insurer Match Program. And this was a provider saying, what do we do when the insurance company is not honoring the HIMP process? Well, HIMP means that a private health insurance company, private health insurer, has paid for medical expenses, but then it turns out that the expenses were related to a workers' comp claim. So now the private health insurer is looking for reimbursement from the comp carrier, the workers' comp insurance company. And let's say that they're having a little difficulty getting that. Well, number one, we do have this process spelled out on our website. You can look under provider. You could make it really easy on yourself and just go in the search box and type HIMP. But what I can tell you is that this is addressed in the law, and what it comes down to is if there is a failure to make full payment or serve an objection within 90 days after the date of service on the HIMP-1 form, it's probably going to go to arbitration. If the carrier fails to make a full payment or object as set forth above, I'm reading the law now, the claim is eligible for and subject to mandatory arbitration. Now, arbitration falls outside of my agency's jurisdiction, so we're not involved in that process. However, you can see the AAA, American Association of Arbitrators. You can see their HIMP webpage. Okay, so as I was saying, if you're interested in this HIMP question, go to our website, and it's wcb.ny.gov/HIMP, and we have all of this spelled out for you. All right, now let's turn to independent medical exams and a best practice for injured workers. Well, sometimes workers get referred to these independent medical exams wherein the insurance company is hiring its own doctor to assess the worker. This doctor will not be providing any treatment. This doctor will not be providing any advice. They will simply be assessing the injured worker in terms of maybe that degree of disability. And so, number one, you're a worker, you can bring a witness. Don't let them tell you anything different. You can bring a witness. Nothing has changed even with COVID. Number two, you can record this. You can do a video, audio, or other recording. Number three, you are going to get a report. Well, you should review that report, and if there's anything in there that you don't remember happening or you don't agree with the decision or the finding, you should either tell the judge or you should tell your attorney if you have one. You can claim that mileage reimbursement to and from an IME. And finally, if you have complaints about the examiner's conduct, not the findings, okay, you think you're 100% disabled and the examiner finds you 75% disabled, that's not conduct, that's a finding. But if you have a complaint about conduct or the office, as in it was not the kind of place where a medical exam should be performed, it was not a medical facility, or you're in a wheelchair and the wheelchair doesn't fit through the doorway. I've actually had that happen. Yes, you can tell my office. I will probably be handling that one myself. Okay, the other benefit, cash benefit, lost wages. Technical term for this is indemnity. It's based on 2/3 of your average weekly wage. So what were you earning on average every week for the 52 weeks before you got hurt? All compensation counts. If you have multiple jobs, yes, we take the compensation from both jobs in the calculation. If you have housing as part of your compensation, well, housing has a value, we'll use that. Overtime, it counts. Bonuses, they count. The maximum benefit right now is $1,063.05. That adjusts every year based on New York's average wages. What that indicates is that in the year 2020 in New York, the average weekly wage, or the average annual pay, I should say, was about $82,900 in the great state of New York. That's just an average. Their temporary benefits, every claim is temporary unless it turns out the injury is permanent. There is a permanent benefit. It's called permanent total disability if you can't ever work again. There's also something called total industrial disability. That is another permanent benefit. There's a benefit if you lose the use of a limb. This is called a schedule loss of use benefit. So if you have an injury that impacts a limb, you need to know about this. Limbs are defined as arms, hands and fingers, legs, feet, and toes. Each finger and each toe has its own benefit rate. And what this means is if you injure that body part after about 18 months or 2 years, you should come to a point that's called maximum medical improvement. It's as well as you're ever going to get. You'll go to a doctor, and the doctor will say, nope, Mr. Rossi, I'm happy to tell you, you're 100% healed. Or the doctor might say, Mr. Rossi, I'm sorry to tell you, you lost 10% of the use of your arm. There is a benefit for that. Also, if you get paid in cash, keep records of your cash payments. Keep a record of it. You should be writing down in a notebook when you got paid, how much, and what date, because you don't have a paper record. You got paid in cash. But if you have a comp claim, that could be very handy for you. I'm speaking from experience here, people. Also, big news, great news. I love this. Direct deposit is now a mandatory option as of July the 1st. If you're an injured worker and you're getting a benefit, I'm urging you to please sign up for direct deposit. Goodness, that makes so many problems go away. There is another benefit called the fatality benefit. Workers who perish due to their employment. The fatality benefit is as follows. Funeral expenses and memorial expenses are reimbursable, as in the money has been spent. And the reimbursement in the downstate New York City metropolitan area, New York City, Long Island, Westchester, and Rockland, is up to $12,500. In the other New York counties, it's $10,500. There is a weekly benefit payment that is possible, and it's calculated the same way as the lost wage benefit. We use a bit of a hierarchy here, which means we look first to see, is there a surviving spouse? That is a legally wed spouse of any gender, by the way. After that, we look to children. Are there children up to age of 18, or are there children who are in college, higher education, we say? up to the age of 23. We also look for any disabled or blind dependents. Those parties would share this benefit. They don't each get the whole benefit. The whole benefit is calculated and then they share it according to a formula. If none of those parties exist, $50,000 is payable to the parents of the deceased worker. If none of those parties exist, $50,000 is payable to the estate. That's it. That's how we do it. So if there are other relations, well, they would have to deal with the estate. Finally, on this topic, there is a not-for-profit. It's a nationwide not-for-profit known as Kids Chance. We are not connected to them in any way, but they are a nationwide not-for-profit who provides scholarships to the children of workers who were killed due to employment or were seriously, grievously injured. Their website is up there on screen, kcnewyork.org. If this is of interest to you in whatever capacity, I'm urging you to go check that out because I know for a fact they are looking for scholarship applications. Also, if there is a fatality, you are probably going to hear from my office because we will release to you the forms that are necessary. Let's talk for a moment about COVID claims. COVID is an infectious disease. Infectious diseases are payable in the workers' comp system. So whatever else you have heard, put it out of your mind. That's the reality. COVID's an infectious disease. Infectious diseases are payable, or the word we use is compensable, in the workers' comp system. You're an injured worker, or in this case, you might be an ill worker, you think you got COVID due to your employment, you're going to need medical reports. That means there's probably a positive PCR test out there somewhere. Please get it on paper and submit it. If you got your results by phone in March of 2020 or April in 2020, you can probably get those results on paper now. Get them on paper, please submit it. You're going to submit a claim. You're going to tell your employer you got this at work if that's what you believe. You're going to submit the PCR test, and you can see a doctor or a healthcare provider, and you can discuss with your provider the details of your workplace. Do you have public contact? Is the public wearing masks? Are you wearing a mask? Is COVID-19 prevalent in your workplace? That's the standard we're using. You do not need to prove that someone sneezed in your vicinity who was COVID positive. That's not how this works. The board is using the standard of, it was COVID prevalent in the workplace. That's why you're talking to your doctor about public contact and masks. And do you have coworkers who you know had COVID at the same time? In other words, share the details honestly and in a forthright manner with your doctor the way that we're supposed to. And then your doctor's going to ask you a couple of questions because this is a public health problem and the doctors have a protocol they use in public health, okay? So then that report will come in and then you'll have your notice, your medicals, and then you can pursue that COVID claim. I would like to point out on our website, there is a fact sheet about COVID. There's also a short video. I recommend them both to you, and not just because I was an integral part of doing them. But yeah, there is good information there on COVID. Bottom line, once again, if you think you got COVID in the workplace, file a claim. I think Adam has something to say.
Yes, we have another scenario here I want to present to you guys. And again, I'll read this off to you, and then if you just want to state your opinion in the chat box, if Liz here should file a claim for COVID exposure. So Liz works at a front desk at a cardiology practice. She checks in patients, handles co-pays, things of that nature. And one day she feels ill and calls in sick to work. Her cardiologist recommended a COVID test, which she took, and it turned out to be positive. So Liz received the paid sick leave for 2 weeks of work she missed before testing negative for COVID and returning to work. And throughout this process, Liz has been vigilant about following COVID protocols. She's always wearing her mask. She's social distancing as much as she can. And, you know, she knows the office has treated patients with COVID before, and a nurse and a doctor at the practice have also contracted COVID during her working hours. So we ask you, should Liz file a COVID claim, or I should say a workers' comp claim for COVID exposure? And again, just write in the chat box, yes or no. We have a yes, a yes. All right, more yeses, Joe. All yeses that Liz should file a claim for COVID exposure. How do we feel about that?
I would recommend she file the claim. Absolutely, yes. You all got that? And we've had questions ahead of time about long COVID. This is why I'm saying please file the claim. Even though Liz got paid sick leave and she's not out any money, well, file the claim, get the claim established, because we don't know what the future holds. If Liz ends up being a COVID long hauler, well, she's got a comp claim. It's established. Medical care is her right for the rest of her life. So, yes, COVID is no different from any other comp claim to the extent that the medical care is your right for the rest of your life. That's why I'm pleased, if you had COVID, if you think it was due to work, file the claim. We just don't know what's going to happen with our health tomorrow. When we were in the questions, I saw that our hemp interest had come back. I talked about that earlier. You're going to have to come to our website and type in HIMP in the search box and go to our page. It's going to come down to you're probably going to have to go to arbitration, which is outside of the board's jurisdiction. There are penalties for late payment. Okay, I'm the advocate for injured workers, so I am aware of penalties that injured workers may receive. Some of the penalties are payable to the board. Some are payable to injured workers directly. Okay, some benefits have to be paid. Benefits have to start within 18 days of incident or 10 days from notice, whichever's later. If a judge makes a decision and says these benefits are due, the benefits have to be paid within 10 days of the filing of that decision. There will be a date on the bottom of the decision that has the filing date. And if there's an appeal and a claim, interest might also be due. Okay, so you're an injured worker. What are your responsibilities? Well, as soon as you're physically capable, maybe based in part on how you feel, but definitely consider what the doctor says about your health, well, maybe you can try to return to work. Employers, anything you can do to bring an injured worker back is going to help the worker and you. If you're an employer and you're worried about your comp premiums, well, if you bring the worker back to work, the worker's not on comp anymore, so there's no more experience pressure on your premium. Also, if you're an injured worker, maybe if we send you an inquiry or a document, if we need a response, if it's coming from the board, you'll know it's coming from the board because it'll be on our letterhead. Please take it seriously. Please reply to it. Please discuss this with your attorney. If you move, if your address changes, for goodness sakes, please tell us. Please tell your insurance company too, especially if you're not getting direct deposit. Also, stay involved in your claim. If you have questions, ask them. If you have an attorney, ask your attorney to explain things to you. If your attorney doesn't give you a comprehensible explanation, say that. If you need us to help you understand events, we can too, but just bear in mind there's some things we can explain to you and some things that are outside our jurisdiction that maybe we can't. You might have a hearing. If there is a hearing, well, we did not have to postpone hearings due to COVID. We just switched everything over to what we call the virtual hearing. So if you do, we'll talk about virtual hearings more in a second, but you and your representative are going to go. You might be asked questions. Always attend your hearings. Even if you have a lawyer, always attend your hearings. Joe is telling you, always attend your hearings. The workers' comp law judge will make the findings. Witnesses might be called. There might be depositions taken. We do not use the formal rules of evidence and procedure, okay? There are no black robes and no gavels in workers' comp. We are doing things, what we call the virtual hearing. This is why we didn't have to postpone hearings. We have this software that's essentially a teleconference. You can participate in your hearing via teleconference, or you can participate by phone. If you want to do this virtual hearing, go to the Google Play Store or the Apple Store, and you can download an app. We have an actual app for this. Also, we are working on this whole new software system that's known as ONBOARD. So we're trying to design a better, completely online system, which means we won't have to do paper anymore. We won't be taking paper from anybody except an injured worker. Injured workers can always submit paper, but we want to get away from taking paper, especially from medical providers. So the first phase of ONBOARD will be from medical providers to bring them on. Finally, here's some contact info. You have my mailbox, Advocate for Injured Workers at wcb.ny.gov. You can call at that phone number. You can visit the website. And the last thing I want to show you, please, we could let it sit on this, I think. We are, let's show them the next one. We're all over social media. As you see, we do put announcements there. We're not just for fun out there. However, what I really want to point you to is the YouTube. We have over 75 training videos on our YouTube channel. I recommend you look at some of them. And also the last item is what we call notifications. You can sign up and receive notifications from us on the topics you're interested in. And we don't harass you with things or besiege you with things. If we're giving you a notification, it's important.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Just a reminder, as part of this series, this webinar will be offered next month. So if you need a refresher at any point, or if any of your colleagues couldn't join today's webinar, we will be offering this webinar again on October 20th. Feel free to go to the workers' compensation website, wcb.ny.gov/webinars. You can find it right on the page there, and you can register for that. Also, as Joe mentioned, you can also sign up to receive workers' compensation news, including information on future webinars right to your inbox. And again, to do that, go to wcb.ny.gov, scroll down to the bottom of the homepage and select Get WCB Notifications. And lastly, as we mentioned, we do distribute information via social media, so please be sure to follow the Workers' Compensation Board on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you all again for joining us. Please continue to stay safe and have a good rest of your afternoon. Thank you.